right, this is the show with no name. Today is somewhere in the month of February, 25th already?
25th.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Your phone's not on. There
I'm not on?
Now you're on. Okay, how about you?
Yeah, we're on.
You seem to be on? Just why don't you say something?
Something?
There you go.
There you go.
All right. Okay, this is the show with no name. I'm Bob Going with Gavin Murdoch and Jim Nikosha. And, well, what's been going on? We, I gotta say, that kid last week, Philip.
Mr. Tabasco.
Oh, good. My God. They don't need us anymore. We just put him on. The hits the video gets when he's on is unbelievable.
Have we gotten the answer to the question of the oldest occupied house in Amsterdam yet?
Well, there were a couple of different questions. One was, which family has been in it the longest? You know who one of the finalists was? Right here. It's Jim Nikosha. Yeah, he was sitting here all through this discussion, and they were, I can go back to the 1930s. Somebody said, well, maybe 1920s. He comes up with 1905, the house he's in.
Not the house I'm in.
Huh?
Not the house I'm in, no.
Oh, it's not the house you're in.
No. It's the longest family-owned house.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're not living?
No.
Nobody in your wife's family is living?
No, they've been out. We've been out maybe 10 years.
Okay, well, that doesn't count then. But anyway, you didn't win anyway.
It was legitimate.
Well, yeah, sort of.
Stayed in the same family for...
Stayed in the same family, but the same family's not living there. You moved up to Division Street.
I moved up to the
Moving
east
on
end.
up.
Moving on up.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
But did we find out the house?
Which is the oldest house in the city that's still a residence?
Occupied, yeah.
No.
occupied by the same family.
No, there's the other question. The other question was the oldest residence in the city that is still a residence. There's a couple of nominees. The one that was on the mimeograph, I'm pretty sure, is actually the house that burned down in 1960, 60-61 winter on William Street, because it was listed on the mimeograph as 19A William Street as the oldest. Well, the house that burned down was both 17 and 19, and my father lived in 17. And it turned out it was the same house, and that's gone. Whether there was an additional house that was a 19A in the back, that's gone too. So it wasn't that. So Dan Weaver got very interested in this because he had an old 1852 map or something like that, and he's up, I think, on either Mechanic or Green Street. I'm not sure which, and he's got a house he thinks is a nominee. Makes sense to me because, the original village was founded around the Chuctanunda Creek.
Correct.
Or the hamlet of Vettersburg that became the village of Amsterdam and the city. So initially, if you look at the 1807 map, the limits extend to what's now Market Street, what's now Church Street, which was Forge at that time, and then maybe a couple blocks into to Liberty Street, and High Street is about what's now High Street is about as far north as you go, other than a little bit up Church Street. Market Street only went maybe, I don't even think as far as Guy Park Avenue now, what's now Guy Park Avenue. So all the houses were in that area. That became downtown. Those houses all went down eventually.
Right.
The Sanford Homestead was where Larrabee's came later, which is now the Professional Plaza on Market Street. And they actually moved, one of the Sanfords moved the house up to 100 Church Street. It was at the end of their first factory building, or second factory building, whatever it was. And just, I think, for sentimental purposes, and somewhere along the line that got torn down. So from there, you got to figure what was developed next. Well, we know William Street was included because that was the oldest house at one time. So you're looking at the block in from Market Street as the old houses that are still there. So Mechanic, Green Street, I think are good possibilities. Maybe another house on William Street, maybe Kimball. Some people suggested the East End. The East End, east of what's now the mall, came much later, before they started developing those streets. Everything else was farmland. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. The wood from the Thomas Bunn house, which was around where all those gas stations are on Market now, ended up in one place, then moved to another, and is now 1 Arnold Avenue. What was the Mary Vanderveer cottage, the famous painter. But that doesn't count, you know. But as far as old wood goes, I think that, that's, over a couple hundred years old, actually, the wood in that house at this point. There are some, you've got some places on the south side that are very old. Dan Weaver's been looking at a house on Albert Street, I think, Albert or Vetter. I'm never sure which is which. That's very old. I've got another nominee that we talked about 78 Lion Street, not currently occupied, but it is technically a residence. That could be, because Rockton was a separate village. South Side was a separate village. Up on Broadway is a home that belonged to my father's second cousin, Eileen Billings. And that was the oldest house going west for a long ways. So I'm thinking that might be a nominee. It's on Broadway past Windswept Drive on the right, if you're going up Broadway. Very old house. So it's actually got, I think, 2 separate attics, and I don't think you can stand up in them either. Never got the full tour, but I've been in the house and seen it from the outside. So that's got to be one of the oldest still going on. Weaver's house is outside the city, so that doesn't count. But I think the Billings house does. Let's see, what else? You got, maybe a couple places in Rockton. I doubt that there's any, Reed Hill was developed in parts fairly early. It was way out in the country at the time. But it was the road to Hageman, or road to Manny's Corners, which was developed, and but I don't think there's anything there that survived. There was the Clisby house was at where Highland and Holland Gardens are now, and that was in the family a long time. The Clisby farm included all of that section of Rockton, McNear and
Cochran,
all those streets in there, McClary and Cochran and Law Place, Sloan. I'm not sure if it went down as far as Bigelow, but close enough. It was that whole area became the Rockton Realty Company, other than the part they reserved for their farm, which later, as I say, became Highland and Holland Gardens. And I'm not sure, but I think the Scully property may have been part of that farm at one time. It certainly would make sense. I have somewhere in my attic school essays written by Clara Clisby, who lived in that house. And she and her brother George were bachelor and spinster, and they lived in that house, each of them to a ripe old age. So these school reports I have from her were written around 1881 when she was 8th grader, and they're beautifully written, but fascinating because one of them she had to imagine she was on an iceberg floating down the Mohawk River and what she would see. Another describes a walk from her house up on the corner of Clisby and Church Street and Widow Susan Road into the village, into Amsterdam, and what she sees along the way. Again, this is like 1881, and she walks a long distance.
Before she sees a house.
Before she finally arrives at what she called the suburb known as Reed Street. The Levittown of 1881. And then walks down and describes downtown Amsterdam as it existed then. And she tells another story. Her father was a doctor, and somebody was sick up at Manny's Corners, and he had to take the sleigh out in the middle of winter to go up there. It was quite a harrowing tale of what, and another one of finding walking through the woods in Manny's Corners and finding an old abandoned house. Now imagine old abandoned house in 1881. How old it must have been. Places came and went, and nature recovered the apple orchards, and it's really interesting stuff. But my great grandparents first appear in the 1855 census, living on Reed Street in a shanty. Yeah. I mean, the genuine shanty Irish. I mean, that's the way it's described in the census, 1855. Oh. So, as I say, that goes back a long ways. But I think there may be houses. I think Weaver's right. I think there may be houses on Mechanic or Green that are still standing that would go back early 1800s.
Oh, it's a great question you posed.
1830 or earlier.
Yeah, I know. Well, if they have the address, can't they get that out of the county archives?
Well, there are old maps that actually have the houses on them. Whether they're the same house is hard to tell, and you can't tell from the deeds whether a house is on the property or not. I was never able to specifically ascertain when our house on Trinity Place was built, somewhere in the 1890s, but we know when the property was bought, but we don't know when the house was built. And it's fast track now, so what the heck's the difference? This is WCSS, you're on the air.
Bob Going.
It is.
Listen, 23 Trinity Place, where I lived, just down the street from your family.
Yes.
That house that I lived in, Bob, was built, I think, around 1865.
Yeah, that had to have been one of the oldest houses on the hill because of the Bunn real estate stuff didn't come till later. So that may have been above the Bunn property. I'm not sure.
Well, I'll tell you what happened when we bought the house and everything. Okay, back many years ago, I found an old picture in it, and it showed a family sitting on the front porch, and in the background was just like rolling hills and stuff like that.
Right. I got one of my houses, exactly the same thing. All of Campus Heights was an empty rolling field, not even a tree.
Oh. And it looked like, almost looked like wooden sidewalk right alongside the house.
Could be.
So anyway, then I found in the cellar, this number 23, a metal plate. So one day I happened to be in my dining room, and I see this car out there stopping by the driveway, and people in it. I think it was a New Jersey car, and they kept looking at the house. So I walked on a porch, and I says, "Can I help you?" So this older man gets out, tall man, white hair, and he looked at me, he says to me, "You live here, don't you?" I says, "Yes, I do." He says, "Well, I lived here years ago." I said, "You did?" Well, it was the Hageman family, Charles Hageman.
Wow.
And he says, pointed a tree out back. Of course, after I cut it down. He says, "That tree that you've got back there was a great big catawba tree." He says, "I planted that when I was a little boy."
And you killed it.
Excuse me?
And you killed it.
And I did. I cut it down. And I told him, I said, "I have this picture." So he came in, and I showed him the picture. He says, "That's my family."
No
And
kidding.
I mentioned about the plate, that metal plate. I made that. I made that in junior high school in the metals class.
Wow.
And then he asked me about, we had one of those, the old days, the old pocket doors.
Yeah.
We had one of those, and when I remodeled, I boarded it up and everything. He says, "Oh my God!" He says, "That was all, when we lived there and we had all that thing." But it was Charles Hageman, the Hageman family,
Wow.
that lived there. And I found out again. I said, I think again the house was built around 1865. It had these great big huge beams in the cellar. They were hand cut.
Looking at it from the outside, you wouldn't picture that house being that old, because it looks more like a 1940s house.
Under the siding was old, was wooden shake shingles, and I can't think of the name the man that put it on. But he lived up on, around Romaine and Coolidge or Summers, that area. He lived up there. He's the man who put that on. But again.
Probably the Otto
It was
brothers.
an old house. Oh, another thing I want to tell you. I don't want to hold you up here.
No, it's okay.
The chimney I went in the basement, and the chimney came down to the top of the wall, the basement wall. It didn't go all the way down into the basement. It was built right on top of the wall like that.
Really?
But it was really, really, because I was looking for a clean out. I said, if I can clean it out and everything. Well, lo and behold, there is no clean out because the chimney was built right on top of the foundation. And that's another thing. When I bought the house, we walked in, the first day we walked in the house, there's this pipe sitting on the floor in the kitchen. I said, what the heck's this doing standing here? Well, I went to move it, and it didn't move. Well, they vented their hot water tank in the cellar. They vented it up through the kitchen floor into that chimney. And it was weird, but that house again was probably around 1865. So that's interesting. You had that picture because I gave the picture. I said, "Do you want this?" Because it was nothing to me. And he says, "Yeah." And so he took that and went away happy, and I never saw him again. But another thing, again, don't want to hold you up.
That's okay.
Up in the attic. I'm up in the attic one day. I was doing wiring. And in the wall, buried in the wall, were like a lot of these old toys. And one was a little porcelain doll, had one leg off and everything. It was stuck in the wall, the attic wall up in the attic. So it was interesting. I found a lot of stuff in that house and everything. When I found it was 1865, I found out it had to be probably one of the oldest houses on
the hill, certainly.
In that hill.
Yeah, I came across once a picture of the Arnold Avenue School. When it was the only thing there. It was only the Arnold Avenue School, nothing else.
That was right behind us then.
And across the street from it was a baseball field on Arnold Avenue.
Are you really?
Yeah, between
you had a picture of that, or you just know about that?
No, I got a picture of it from an old recorder from the 40s, looking back to the 1890s or something like that. Yeah,
got to live to see that thing.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
that is really interesting. I'll tell you, really, really interesting. And I grew up on. Well, I grew up on Park Hill. In my early years, I grew up in Park Hill, up by big old Sanford's on Park Street. And I remember, of course, when Sanford owned all the homes on Park Street.
Yeah.
And then they would come through every so many years, and they had their own repair people. They would paint every house. And then, of course, you had the Presidential Heights up on top there, where we, as kids, we used to call it the rich people who lived up there.
Yeah.
And but it was interesting. It's I love to go back in time and
the jealous people called it Teapot Dome.
Crazy, and you know who I am. I always said it sounds crazy, but I'd love to be able to go back in time, be invisible, and just walk the streets of Amsterdam and see what it was like.
Yeah, well, you'd probably your feet would get muddy. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I know.
And covered with horse manure.
Yeah. Listen, have a great day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah, when we were selling my grandfather's house on McClary, that was one of the early houses in the Rockton Realty plot, but it only dated from like 1903 or something like that. In the attic, I found under the floorboard, under a loose floorboard, a tobacco baseball card that dated from when the house was built. So the workmen are up there smoking and who needs this, and they throw it in, and it was a Wagner.
Wow.
I'm not. You're looking at me askance. because the Honus Wagner tobacco cards are extremely rare.
That's $1 million card.
Yeah, yeah. So I got all excited until I realized it was Charles Wagner of the Boston Americans. But that's how old it was. It was before they were the Red Sox. It was like 1903. And it mentions while not as famous as Honus Wagner, he's nonetheless a solid journeyman second baseman or whatever the heck he was. I should know this as a Soxian. But yeah, you never can tell.
Oh, what you're going to find.
Yeah. There's apparently a long tradition among masons that when they're laying bricks, every row of bricks they'll put a penny in somewhere. So when they tear down these old buildings, you'll find the pennies from the era that they were built in. Tony Marcelino told me that. He also said he founded 1909 SVDB, but I don't believe that. I never. It's a good story though.
Yeah.
Anyway,
story. So I would think this has probably generated the most discussion of any of Philip's questions, because it's not a easily definable
but it's
answer.
Both those questions are fun to delve into. Who can go back the farthest? Yeah. Well, on the same family in the house, went back to like the 1880s or something like that, which is what I was looking for. But anyway, this is WCSS. You're on the air.
Hi, Bob.
Hi.
I got to tell you, this is the most awesome show I've heard on the radio in quite some time.
Well, thank you. We try to make every one of them more awesome than the last.
No, this is so interesting. So interesting. I lived on Locust Avenue for years, and the old I hate the feedback. I'm sorry. The old rug factories. My grandmother, when we bought the house on Locust Avenue, she had said to me, "I think that was the house that I grew up with and met your grandfather." And every night I'd go up to the attic, and he would be in a room and flash the lights to say goodnight to her. So the history of Amsterdam is awesome.
Yeah.
And I would really, oh God, if you ever do another book, print those letters, essays out.
I several times over the years I've started typing them up, and they're all on computers that are in my attic someplace, I think. So yes, absolutely. I'm not exactly sure where in my attic they are. I mean, I know the general corner they're in, but they're in a corner with the archives of the universe. So
yeah. Oh, that would be an awesome book.
Yeah.
Awesome book.
I started. 20 years ago I started typing them up.
Wow.
And it's interesting how they came into my possession. My grandfather went to the auction when they were tearing down the Clisby house to make room for Highland Gardens. So this is early 60s. And he had known the Clisby family. In fact, I've got a 2-hour interview he did on tape with George Clisby in the 1950s about life in the 1870s. Anyway, after the auction, there was left over this pile of newspapers and other papers, and he says to the auctioneer, "What do you want for those?" He says, "I'll take them." So he takes them, and among the things now in my possession are the front page stories from the Recorder of the sinking of the Titanic and its aftermath. And he found a World War I issue that had a story about him in it. And I got all these Clara Clisby essays on top of it, so kind of neat.
Oh, and I know because I worked in history and archives for years. The newspapers that are in the archives, it's amazing to sit down. I transcribed when 2 hangings in Montgomery County, right in the courtyard by the old courthouse.
Yeah.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you could find that information there.
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. You just got to keep digging for it.
Oh, if you want to dig.
Yeah.
And most people just want to sit on the internet and punch a button, you know.
Well, there's a lot of the information there too. I'll tell you that you couldn't reach before.
Yeah. Me.
Including the old newspapers.
And when I heard talk about your grandfather from 1855 census.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's all handwritten.
Sure.
You know, everything was handwritten back there.
Yeah.
So, but I got to tell you, I just am enjoying you so much today.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. See, we got one fan.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Struck a very popular and enjoyable topic. You know.
Well,
That is because there's a lot of history in the city, you know, and
yeah.
you know, the young people think all they think about is the new homes that that they would like to live in.
Yeah.
You know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was let's see, 9 when we moved into Trinity Place, and it was an old house. My father had a history in the house because the previous owners were the Turners. John Turner, the architect or builder or whatever he was, designed the clock building, or built the clock building, one or the other, among other things. He raised his family in that house, and one of the children was Dick Turner, who was a high school classmate of my father's. And there came, I hope I'm not embarrassing anyone. I think they're all dead. I got to think about this. Anyway, Bud Langley, Dick Turner, my father, Packy McCabe. One of them was not my father. One of them turned in a book report late, and the teacher threw it in the basket because it was late. Wouldn't even look at it. And he said, "I protest." And then the next one says, "I protest." And the 4 of them protested. And the 4 of them got kicked out of school.
Whoa.
All right, go home. You're done for the day. So, you know, the Turners had a pool table in the back room of our house, so they spent the afternoon shooting pool on Fort Trinity Place. So, anyway, when we moved into the house, first time I'd ever lived in an real old house. And so I examined every inch of it. You know, I found where there had been a really primitive burglar alarm at one time. Where I threw a switch in the basement, all of a sudden something starts buzzing. It turned out it was hooked up to the front door somehow. Looking for trap doors and secret entrances, and I could see that the back part of the house was built after the front part of the house, and trying to imagine how the rooms were originally aligned. It was great stuff. There was a patent number on the inside the fireplace, so with a year date on it. So I said, "Well, okay, so this was put in on or after 1908, or you know, whatever." It was just a lot of fun. A lot of fun. My dad had owned for a while 41 Church Street, which is one of those row houses that's still there where Dr. Sitch's dental. He owned one of those, second one from the top, and that was really ancient, you know. And it had one of those call tubes for the servants. The servants would live on the 3rd floor, all right?
Yeah.
And you know, but they had sealed up the other end of it, so it was no fun. But there were like, I think, 4 bedrooms on each floor, the staircase going up the middle, and a skylight. It was kind of dark, but you know, they got the light in as best they could. But ancient. That's where I got the photograph of the Gettysburg encampment on the 50th anniversary, which I don't know where it is now either. I mean, that must be in the attic too. I don't know. It's time to start cleaning this stuff out, right, Mayor? Yeah.
We grew up on the Heights up in Henrietta.
Yeah.
And we lived on Fairmount. And most of the houses were relatively new up there, but there was one house north of us, a family by the name of Bozak lived there. But it looked like to us as kids like the Addams family house, and we call it the Bozo Mansion. And we'd always We would not go there for Halloween to trick or treat. Had these bushes in the front. It just,
across the street. When
you did. There's no sidewalks. You just walked across. But it just creeped us out. It just looked like it was way too old, and probably we shouldn't be going there. And yet all the other houses are pretty pristine up there because they were all new. I mean, and then you go up a little bit farther up on a Chapel. There were virtually no houses. They're all fields up there. And then you go to the other parts of town, and they're pretty well populated. But we were kind of sparse up there when back in the early 50s.
My current house is about 1909, I think, that was built. But my father also lived on Wilkes Avenue as a kid, and it was one of like 3 houses on Wilkes.
The flat end or the hill end?
Little bit west of University. No, not west of University. It was east of University.
Yeah, that's up on the flats.
Yeah, it was on the flat part. It was between Ruth Street and University, on the left-hand side.
By Massane.
Yeah. On the left-hand side, going west.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my father's ran into my father's cousin Margaret Lewison when we were out for a walk one day, and she was out for a walk, and she says, "Oh, let me show you Uncle Jamie's house," because my grandfather was her uncle, and so we go down there, and she showed me which house it was. And when they were kids, that was like the end of the world up there.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, my great-great-grandparents up on what's now Van Dyke Avenue, and like near the hospital. There was the only house there.
Yeah, you had a ways to go.
Wow.
Down on where Henrietta makes the turn to come up the hill there, off the flats going west. You used to be able to get into the golf course there. The fence was pretty rusty there. And we'd go in with my dad, and we'd be able to pick raspberries. Oh, they were the best raspberries. Then if we got really adventuresome, we'd go a little bit further in and get to the spring in there and get some spring water in jug bottles and
from the golf
home.
course?
Yeah.
The golf course spring?
Yeah. Wouldn't dare do that
Does that
today.
still run?
I don't think
know.
the spring does,
I don't
no.
know.
But just think about all the places in town that there were springs that you
There were
could
a
go
lot of them.
to get water.
Yeah.
And my grandparents on a weekly basis would go to the one down on the hill of Henrietta between Henrietta and Stewart Street.
The one behind Horrigan's house.
Yeah.
There,
We'd go in there and get, of course, even then it was a real old rusty pipe, but you didn't give 2 thoughts about it because there's nice spring water, and take it home, and it was, nice and cold and clean and everything.
I think Robert Shaw had a place on Henrietta, right?
He did, that little spring house.
The spring
There's
house
a
is
little
still
house
there?
there.
The spring house is still there? I think he had to close it up because the Board of Health said he had to start inspecting the water, and he had to take all kinds of tests.
Come on.
And they closed down the one by Pertel's house on Clisby Avenue.
Yeah.
And they were all in the city. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was one that came off the side of the Four Diamonds area, up on the hill. Well, there was a pipe where it drained. I don't know if I would drink that, but what the heck? Yeah, I would drink anything probably.
Yeah, I mean, you drink it out of the hose out in the yard.
Yeah.
As long as you weren't the first one, because the first one got the really hosey, the rubbery taste water. But after that, it was fine.
I always let it run a little.
Yeah, and it was fine. Now it's like, ooh, why would you do that? But we obviously must have built some kind of resistance because we didn't get sick from it.
We survived.
We survived. Yeah.
And there was a artesian well over at Albright's Dairy on Bell Hill that they enclosed the whole building around, and I think that's where they got the water for schoolhouse pools. And maybe they still do.
I remember the trucks used to be down there all the time from schoolhouse. Yeah.
And then the whole Northampton Road area was known as White Spring back in the olden days, and there was a running spring that's now been completely enclosed. my predecessor in title, there was no running water on George Street until 1925. So the house was built in 1909. For the first 16 years, he would carry a barrel of water from down on Northampton Road up George Street to his house every day for drinking and bathing. Yeah.
And it was uphill both ways.
And it was uphill both ways when you're carrying a barrel, I'll tell you. Joey Pep's house, and I think a couple of the other houses on his side of Northampton, have the spring actually running through their basements, and it's like having an extra refrigerator, because ice cold. And then it takes a sharp left-hand turn on Major Lane, and it runs under Major Lane, and then takes a sharp right-hand turn behind the houses on Northampton. And it's all enclosed now, and goes, I think, actually under Dr. Dunning's building, and then under all the streets, and then comes out down by West Main. But that's the White Spring, and it was a major source of water. And there were factories believe it or not, on Northampton Road back in the olden days. Yeah. I don't know whether they used water power from that or what, but yeah, hard to believe. But of course, that was the major road north-south. That was the Plank Road. And it's called Northampton Road because it went to Northampton. That was before Market Street opened, the Upper Market. Anyway, those are my stories.
I think the house that we own on West Main Street, I think they added the front part of the house on after, I don't know when, but the way it's configured, it doesn't look like they would have built the house
look like that,
like that, because the stairs to get upstairs, there's no platform outside the door. You open that door.
No landing.
No landing. You've opened that door. First step is right there, and so it.
Yeah, you save space that way.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Watch that first step.
Yeah, they saved a lot of space because the lot is only 40 feet wide.
It's a narrow one.
Yeah.
This is WCSS. You're on the air.
I'm talking about the place, spring water. I'm getting a feedback, but we used to play baseball down the barge, and coming back over Stewart Street where the tennis courts are. The place, Shellerworth, I think, owned that area.
Right. Yeah, that's the one we were talking about, right? That's where you used to go? Yeah. And that still runs.
Oh, yeah, I guess. And talking about Turner, their homestead was on the corner of Union and Glen Avenue.
Yes, before they moved up the hill. That's right. And that house was saved from destruction a few years ago, and it is still there. Yeah, yep. Bottom of Glen Avenue.
Yep.
On the west side. Yep.
And they built Sanford's Mills, and I remember we had a picture of my father's. He had a chain-driven Ford dump truck, and he was drawing bricks up there for the building.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, I think it was like around 1880 or so, I came across an article about how many bricks were made on Brickyard Hill to build the Sanford Mills along, what's the name of the street there? Willow Street?
Yeah, right.
It was just incredible. Hundreds of thousands or millions. But they actually had a finite number as to how many bricks were made to make those buildings. Just imagine. Look at the size of those buildings.
And Turner, they were a big outfit. They built a lot of buildings.
Yes, they did.
They never had any trucks or anything. They rented them all.
Wait a minute. How old are you?
Well, I'm 83.
Okay. All right. You go back there. Yeah.
Yeah, you used to come up to our office and before you went to work and read the paper every day. Okay, thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, everything was a going concern back then.
Yeah.
There was the building and the expansions and the production.
We can't imagine what it was like.
Did they only have one brewery in Amsterdam?
No. Philip will look that up for you, but there were a number of breweries. But there was one down the west
I know
end.
there were soda. I know there were soda plants, but I didn't know there were breweries. I thought there was just the one on the west end.
Well, no, that was probably the last one, but there were others. Yeah. In fact, I was up in the attic at the museum the other day, and I came across what do you call those clay things that the bootleggers swig out of their
Jugs.
Jugs, yeah, the jugs. And it was from a wine store and brewery on East Main Street, like where a little bit west of the KeyBank building or the Cranesville Block building.
Really?
But we're talking, I mean, this has got to be like the 1840s or something like that that this dates from. So yeah, over the years, sure, there was no shortage of alcoholic beverage in town ever, as far as I can tell.
No matter what decade you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, on the frontier, that's what they lived on. I mean, they started drinking first thing in the morning and would drink all day long.
And it was safer than the water.
That's probably why.
That's why they drank it.
Yeah. So, brew your own. Everybody brew their own, make their own Applejack. Or if you were rich, you bought it down at 14 East Main Street. Yeah. Let someone else make my Applejack for me.
There you go.
It's beneath me. I don't want to get my fingers dirty.
Just want to wet your whistle.
Wow. But somewhere along the line, I posted on my blog the history of Market Hill as written in the 1940s from someone who was talking about experiencing it in the 1890s. Okay? And one of the things that really jumps out at you, because we're used to, a house goes up in Amsterdam, everybody shows up because, it's such a rare event.
Yeah.
Right? She talks about how they would the family would take a walk every Sunday around Market Hill to see how many new houses were being built since last Sunday. Yeah. Because once they opened that up, I mean, people ran from downtown because the air was healthier up there. They understood that, it's and there was more light, more everything. The houses were a little farther apart, and
when places start, everybody wants to be around the center of town, and as things prosper, people want to get farther and farther away from the center of town.
Just opening up Market Hill must have been something, because they had to get up over that lip at Prospect Street.
Yeah.
The corner of Prospect and what's now Market Street was the city's, or the area's, second cemetery. The first one was down by Bridge and West Main Street. But they quickly outgrew that, because that was the edge of the village. That's where they had the cemetery, and pretty soon it was just consumed. Also, in one of these 1880 newspapers, I came across this straight out of Spielberg, where the spring floods raised the coffins into the basement of this warehouse that had stood over the cemetery, and the bodies were floating. Oh, geez, it was absolutely gruesome. So the second one was under Tom and Max in that area, Joe's Market, and so that was the end of the city. I guess there was an archway at the top of Market Street where you'd go into the cemetery, and that was it. But then when Bunn opened up his farm, then and that went down to Elizabeth. I think his wife's name was Elizabeth. So all those streets are named after him. He was Thomas Bunn, so you got Thomas, and my street was Mary Street, Trinity Place. So that was probably one of his too. Yeah.
But just think of the effort of bringing all the building materials up from the tracks up Market. I mean, that's a formidable hill you're coming up there.
That's right. That's right.
And there's no easy way.
And they had to actually use oxen and war horses to cut away the hillside on Upper Market when you're getting up to Grant Summit and Van Dyke, and all those houses. You know how all those houses sit up, on pedestals up there. That was the level of the hill, and they put that cut through there so they could connect it ultimately with Northampton. But otherwise, it would have been impossible. It apparently was like a cliff at the time, but they did it. They did it the hard way with horses and oxen and sleds.
Yeah, well,
plows.
Labor.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because there is no level way to get. I mean, if you come up Northampton, that's the easiest way. It's longer, but it's easier than coming up.
It is,
Market.
which is why. When it got really icy in the winter, we sometimes have to go up Northampton Road and then come back down to get to Trinity Place. Just couldn't make the hill.
Yep.
In the olden days.
That happened regularly. You had trouble on the hills in Amsterdam, whether it was Henrietta or Evelyn or Northampton and Market. I mean, it was. People didn't have the luxury of the studded tires and things. We complain, well, the streets aren't plowed. Well, they weren't plowed back then. Occasionally they did, but nothing like what we try to expect today.
Oh, no. My wife's grandfather must have been fairly well-to-do because he had a car on Vanderveer Street. But come winter, he would put it up on blocks, take the tires off, and wait till spring because there was no way you were going to drive it. That's when you got the sled out. And we're not talking, 200 years ago. No. We're talking
50 years ago. 60 years
He died in 1964, so we're not talking that long ago.
No. When we were young.
Yeah. That was 50 years ago, wasn't it? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
Time's phone, you're having flies.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, all these 50-year anniversaries coming up was all in our youth.
Yeah. Youths of Amsterdam.
Wow. God. We're the old guys now.
Yeah, we are.
Not Jim.
We're getting to be old guys.
Not Jim. He doesn't count. He's a carpetbagger.
Yeah. We're getting to be old. Yeah.
Remember old in Gloversville?
Do I remember old in Gloversville? A little bit. I remember.
So I did not know that area before 30A came through. Yeah. So it was probably a lot cuter when Gloversville and Johnstown were just streets running into each other.
Yeah. It was just like being in one city. Really.
What was my sister moved to Gloversville to a real old house. That house would qualify as the oldest house in Amsterdam, I think. It was like 1830 or something like that she's in. Anyway, there were two parts of Gloversville that eventually merged, and she's like in the Kingsborough section. But the other section of Gloversville, before it became Gloversville, was called Stumpville, I believe.
Stump City.
Stump City. Can you imagine? And I guess, I don't know. I suppose their sports team would be called the Stumpies or something like that.
The family house in Gloversville would probably meet Tim Basco's criteria for the oldest.
Yeah.
The family living the longest in the same house. Cause
really?
My nieces still live in the same house that my parents lived in.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm 81, so my sister is 96.
And it was before that?
And it was before that they owned the house. So.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. How old's your house, Kevin?
1930s.
Really?
Yeah. It was 1930s put up, yeah.
I guess we got time. Right?
Yeah. The house in Gloversville, every time somebody wants to move out of the house, there's a relative waiting to go in there. They want that, and it's just a small place too.
Is it still in somebody's estate or?
No, my niece owns it.
Oh, she owns it outright.
Yeah. My brother.
So it's not still in your parents' estate.
No.
You don't own a piece of it.
It went from my parents to my brother, to my other brother, to my niece.
Okay. Well, that's not too bad. That's too bad. My house has kind of got it's got a growing Amsterdam theme to it. Old Jim McKinney, who built the house back when he was young Jim McKinney, entered a contest sponsored by the Board of Trade. And the contest was to come up with a slogan for Amsterdam. Now, a lot of things they rejected, like small city, big heart, and one people, many cultures. Or those didn't make it. But Jim McKinney won with "Success is yours" in Amsterdam, and that remained the slogan of the city for the next 40 years.
Wow.
It was in every recorder, under the publisher's name.
Banner,
"Success is yours" in Amsterdam, and he was, 20 or thereabouts, 21 at the time he came up with that, and the prize was 4 building lots on George Street.
Really?
So he.
Yeah, nobody wanted to live on George Street. You couldn't make it up the hill.
Well, yes, they were by no means the finest lots in the Mockhold Campus Heights portfolio because they were like on the worst. Yeah, so they weren't giving away Wilkes Avenue lots, or they weren't giving away Brown Street lots. They were giving away George Street lots, but that's okay. They were free. He won it. Won the contest, got the 4 lots. He was courting Anna McNally at the time, and he takes her up the hill to show her his lots, and he proposed to her on the spot. And she said,
"You're nuts."
She said, "I will marry you if you build me a house right here."
Is that right?
Yeah. And the view was fantastic, especially before the trees grew up. Frankly, the view was a lot better 30 years ago when I bought the place than it is now. But that's all right. I don't want anybody looking in on me. But yeah, so he builds a house. He's 21 years. Nobody tells him he can't do it. He just builds this huge house and raised our family there. And there was they were the only family there before us.
Wow. Now, do you have 4 lots still contained there, or did they get sold off?
Oh, no. We got not only that, we got the 4 lots plus many years later in the 1950s, he bought the whole backyard where the pool is and down below, which it was again as big as the original 4 lots, and then he bought the Dartmouth driveway, the driveway up to Dartmouth Street later on. So when we got it, we had 1.5 acres, and then we bought the corner too. So we got about 2 acres.
So you got a lot of lots.
Oh yeah. And nobody bothers me. I've had I think 1 Jehovah's Witness, one Mormon, and a couple of encyclopedia salesmen over the years, and I think. I don't think, honest to God, I don't think more than 4 campaigning politicians have come to my house in the.
Can you name them?
In the 33 years, yeah. Bob Kenny came to the house. Angelo Santa Barbara was the last one. Joe Emanuel, and wait, there was another Democrat.
There's another Republican too.
Well, you don't count.
Oh, see?
You're my friend.
He forgot.
Yeah.
See, he forgot.
It probably was you, actually. Yeah.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, you were the 4th one. Yeah. Oh, honest to God, that was it. Yeah. That's the first time I met Joe Emanuel. He
That's
came
the
to my
first
kitchen.
time I met you.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a driveway.
And he says to me, if you run up this hill to campaign, he says, you got my vote. He says, and 5 people in this house.
That's right.
You did say that.
Yep. Honest to God, it was such a rare event.
Yeah.
Well, anyway. That's what happens when you... How old's your house, Jim?
My house, I think it was 1923.
Yeah, that end of town was kind of late developing. Yeah, because.
But I think there was only 4 owners for that house in all the years. I think the original owner, the hospital, owned it, Cinquanti family owned it, and us. I think. If there's anybody before the hospital, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The nurses lived in that house.
I'm surprised they let go of that because, once they started having zoning problems, they started buying up everything that was for sale in the neighborhood, and rightly so. It was a smart move because then they controlled their parking lots and and their doctors' offices and everything else. But yeah, I remember they wanted to put up a building for doctors, and all these people up and down Guy Park Avenue were screaming, "Put them somewhere else! Oh, we love doctors. We love doctors, right? But not in my neighborhood.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
Not in my backyard.
Everyone's progress, but not here.
Right, not here.
And we've proved that because we don't have any.
That was. I don't know when did they connect Spring Street with what's now Guy Park, because that originally was known as the Boulevard, and I think you could only get to it from the other end, from the west end, and somewhere along the line they connected it. Yeah. Was that part of the Mockhold property too, or not or the McFarland property, or the Mockhold property? It was probably Mockhold property, not the McFarland property. Mine was McFarland.
It didn't go all the way to Market?
No, it stopped at the Harrower House on the corner of Northampton and Spring Street. That was known as Spring Street because it went to the White Spring that we were talking about. Right. And the spring before going back down Northampton, behind the Northampton houses, went into what shows up on the old maps as Major Pond. And you can guess where that's located. Major Lane was Major Pond. They filled it. They enclosed the spring, drained the pond, and put the road there. But you still see water dripping down there fairly often.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, Major Pond. Most of that first part was a pond.
I think they have a problem there every year on
of course
Northampton Road.
Yeah, because it's all draining off of the McNulty School Hill.
Yeah. Well, not only that, I think there's a spring on the other side of the road that every year it comes through.
All right, now is there anybody left alive who remembers who stole the cows from the Collins farm, which is where it's now all school district property? I mean, I heard that story when I was a kid. I don't know how many times, and I think from people who were participants. Yeah, I mean, they stole a cow. I forgot what they did with the cow, but it was like the great event of their youth. Was I mean, I heard this story for years. How we,
I never heard that story.
They took the cow and hid it from Old Man Collins or something. I don't know.
Oh.
So we're going to do another podcast. Hopefully Friday, if you guys show up this time.
We'll see.
Yeah. There's no soccer or bagpipes this Friday, so we should be there.
Right. Hopefully we won't have the ice on the driveway. Oh boy, it was bad.
Was it bad?
Yeah. I would have, if I'd realized how bad it was, I would have called you and said, don't show up.
I'll tell you what. I was going to go, and I got busy doing something, and all of a sudden I said, "Oh my God, it's 12 o'clock."
Yeah. So let's see. Did we have Laura that day? I guess we had Laura the next day. So Laura and I did it. Started to do our own show again. So that was a lot of fun. She's such a scamp. What a joy. Yeah.
Yeah. Grandchildren are a joy when they're young. when they get to be about 17, 18, they'll be on.
Well, anyway. This is the end of the show. There's no time to go. And so, tune in for the podcast on Friday night or Saturday morning or anytime thereafter, and the show with no name on Facebook or any number of other places. It'll be on YouTube. And then we'll be back here next Tuesday at 11 o'clock. Right here on WCSS 1490 in Amsterdam, New York, where this has been the show with no name.